problems with the Republicans. He oftentimes has problems with Washington in general. He oftentimes has problems with Trump. And if you take a look at most and many of his stances, they're mostly common sense, working folk oriented and less sort of partisan reactionary party line.
Well, I don't think the Republicans represent me very well. I mean, I've been sort of forced to vote for them because I don't know what else to do at this stage. I don't want to. But I don't think the divide is between the parties, and I actually don't think it's even ideological at this point. It's temperamental and economic. So the two divisions are, if you see someone you disagree with in a restaurant who voted for something you don't like, do you feel a moral obligation to scream at him until he leaves? If you don't, probably on my side. And are you richer than you were after the financial collapse of 2008? I mean, that's kind of the core division. And where I live in D.C., I mean, it really is like a giant Bel Air, to put it in Southern California terms. It's like you're there, it's beautiful, it's nice, there's full employment, but there's also no sense life exists beyond its boundaries at all, because our city is totally immune to economic fluctuation because our economy is based on the federal budget, which expands. Like, that's all it does. So if you're in D.C., you feel like, well, the country's like doing great. And then you drive from D.C. to like Pittsburgh, pick a city, take a 4-hour drive in any direction, and you pass through towns of like 10,000 people with no car dealership because it went out of business, where like the majority of grown men do not have full-time jobs, where 30% of them are daily taking some kind of painkiller on disability. It's like, it's actually a disaster. It's like free fall culturally. And there are a lot of reasons for that, and I'm not sure I understand. I'm not an intellectual. I'm a talk show host, so I don't fully understand everything that's going on. But I know disaster when I see it, and no one seems to even acknowledge it. It's like, what? What's what you were saying before we went on the air? You said take a camera crew up and drive around parts of the valley that, like, I grew up knowing, right, because I'm from here. And I think of them as sort of stable, normal, middle-class places. Multiracial, by the way. It's not a race thing. It's just like normal people live there, and now they're covered in graffiti and filth and gangs. People don't understand the extent to which huge parts of the country have slipped into something really ugly in third world. They don't even know. And that is what drives me freaking crazy.
Well, for me, I'm an atheist, and I don't have much education, formal education. And, I kind of tell people, well, I'm allowed to weigh in with my opinions because I've never really read anyone else's opinions. My thoughts are not polluted with other people's ideas. It sounds somewhere between it sounds pompous and it sounds arrogant, pompous, and ill-informed simultaneously. But I really do mean that I was allowed to sit around and form my own thoughts. I didn't get indoctrinated into any side. I'm not a fan of anyone's literature. I did not hear this professor lecture on this subject endlessly. I have no education. I went to North Hollywood High. I was a ceramics major. I didn't take algebra. I never took the SATs. I was warehouse. I never learned to read or write. I got out of that. I worked carpet cleaning. I worked construction. There was no indoctrination. I was free just to sit and watch.
Yes.
And absorb and observe. But I didn't. I'm not coming at it from any angle because I have no alma mater. I have no team to represent.
So you really are the proverbial guy from Mars who just showed up and assessed it on its own terms.
Well, in a way, like when you say, like, well, what if a guy just came down from outer space? Yeah. What would he think? Yes, I come from a family that imparted nothing. We didn't put an emphasis on anything. We were not churchgoers. We were not Jehovah's Witnesses. There was no indoctrination, anything. If anything, there was probably a little left-leaning kind of 70s SoCal hippie vibe that I kind of quickly sussed out as mostly bullshit. Well, sorry, not mostly bullshit, all bullshit. Like everything my mom predicted, none of it ever came true.
I lived like that, too. It's so funny.
And it's funny. I always think about it, like all the warnings about sitting too close to the TV set and the microwaves and white bread killing you and all the things that all the pollution, all the everything all the doom and gloom and how we're going to be living underground by the year 2000 and blah, blah, blah. They got it all wrong. And the one thing they missed was the sun being harmful. They would tell us
exactly. People use tinfoil in the backyard.
It was like no. It was to get so they could tan their jowls. It was the underside of the jowl.
Yes.
Like it was like don't get. My mom was like, don't use a pillow. It'll screw up your spine. But all summer long, shirt off, cut off jeans, out in the front yard,
of course,
for 11 hours running through the sprinklers. There was no put on a T-shirt or get some pab on your shoulders. Now I know why. As I think about it. The man didn't make the sun. The sun was the sun's on our side. Yes. In other words, like they're not Procter and Gamble. They're not making white bread and white flour and white rice and white this and white. Everything was white. Like it couldn't be anything white. Brown rice,
Of course.
Have brown sugar, no problem. White sugar, So it was that. And the sun, no problem. So the one thing that turned out to be harmful was the sun. And that's the one thing they never brought up. No one ever said.
That is so funny. I mean, I really grew up in the same world you did because that's exactly right. And it was a world governed by its neuroses primarily. Like they were afraid. I had a cousin run away from home and live with us when I was a kid. She lived in Truckee, California, up near Tahoe, and she got in a fight with parents. 16, moved in with us. And the first thing she did, whenever she'd come to breakfast, she'd duck under the microwave. And we're like, what are you doing? And she's like, oh, it's emitting rays that are going to distort my DNA.
Right.
But she had all kinds of other terrible habits that were never acknowledged because they were considered fine.
Yeah, so when a lot of this stuff is, what's old is new again, where a lot of this stuff is cropping up again, I lived through it the first time.
Me too.
I've realized just how wrong everyone was
Who
the
was your
first
governor
time.
Then?
Brown, probably.
Right. That's the funniest part. He's
back, too.
I know.
Right. It's insane. Chris, you can find out when Brown governed. It certainly was the governor in 75 and now back again. So it is weird, this full cycle sort of revisiting the past. And we're, Governor Moonbeam is right back with us again. So I had a family that had no preconceived notions of anything. Nobody ever pulled me aside and said, don't trust Jews or blacks. Nobody ever said, focus on this, and this is how you make your bones, or the people with the money. I never had any discussion. There was literally no discussion. I was just free range. And we didn't have any money, and it's also, he was 75 to 83, perfect, and now 2011 to present. I did catch little glimpses. My mom was on welfare and food stamps and hated the government, and I started sort of sussing out the folks that were relying on the government actually hated the government. We lived in a house that was my grandmother's second house that she was supposed to rent out, but my mom was sort of a mess, so we got to flop there. And it started to dawn on me that the people my mother hates the most are her mom, who provide a house,
exactly,
and the government, who provide the cheese.
Yeah.
So there's two people on this planet, or two entities, that are actually keeping us alive, and those are the only two people you hate.
Of course.
She didn't hate Menachem Begin. I didn't hear any ill words to any Ayatollahs or anybody that. She hated her mom and the government. And I was sort of 9, kind of going, well, aren't these the two people that are kind of keeping us afloat over here? Why so much rage against the two entities?
That's always the way it is.
Of course, it can. I also learned it can go no other way.
Exactly. That's exactly right. You hate the people you're dependent upon and the people you wrong. If you sin against people, you hate them, which is one of the reasons everyone in Washington hates working-class white men whose salaries on average have declined 11% over 30 years. Can you imagine that? They're the people whose life expectancy is shrinking, and yet they've got all the privilege. We hate them. They're the problem. Really?
Well, I have yelled on my podcast before, and I'm sure it wouldn't go over very well in some circles in Hollywood, but they go, white men, they're responsible for slavery. They're responsible for all atrocities. And I kind of go, yeah, but we're also responsible for everything. So it's sort of unfair. The Golden Gate Bridge, that that is white man's work as well. So it's like, I get it. If you're out there doing everything, you're going to have a couple of misfires.
You know what's so weird? Since you grew up in this, again, the same world I did, like the one thing you were not allowed to do, as value-free and judgment-free as 1979 Southern California was, you were not allowed to attack groups of people on the basis of their race. Like that was just not allowed, at least where I lived. Like I never heard anyone do it, ever. And now... And it was the left that enforced that rule, which is a fine rule as far. I mean, you know what I mean? I'm okay with that. I don't think you should judge people on things they're not responsible for, they can't control. Now that is like the currency of the very same people. They're like, well, the real problem is this racial group because of their race. It's like, wait, I thought that was the definition of racism. I'm losing track here.
Well, as I'm fond of saying, there's never been a better time in this country to be an actual racist.
Right.
Because you'll just get lumped in with me and Tucker Carlson.
We do segments on the show all the time where like, look, just to be clear, racism is wrong because judging people on things they're not responsible for is wrong, and group punishment and collective guilt are wrong. They're the opposite of everything that makes us America. That's wrong. And my producer, I never text, Google myself. My producer will text me and be like, there's another piece calling you a racist.
Again,
it's so Orwellian.
If you want to hide with half the population who has been labeled racist, you can just, and you're an actual racist.
It's pretty
You can
funny.
blend right in. The thing, I always marvel a little bit. I never really, I marvel at the lack of self-awareness. Like,
Yes.
I will turn on your show or I'll turn on the news, and I'll see the black middle-aged professor from Princeton, and 7 inches to his left is a white guy in his 60s, and he'll go, old white guys. Again, this is the problem. And I'm thinking, there's an example of an old white guy who's not coming into the studio later to do his own show and may hear this on the radio. He's sitting right next to you.
Yeah.
I mean, I've made a few fat guy jokes and beyond, but I rarely do it with a obese person sitting next to me.
Well, the best is when the old white guy himself does
He's nodding.
Right,
and
or
he's
says,
nodding.
so the problem is, and you really get the feeling what he's really saying is, eat me last.
Right.
You know what I mean? When the revolution comes, just remember, we welcome our new insect overlords and look forward to toiling in their sugar caves. I mean, that's what they're really saying.
Love The Simpsons. And once in a while, my wife, who's very Italian and very much in love with her son, who you'll probably be meeting later on today because she's pulling him out of school to meet you. He's a big fan. He's 12.
Oh, good for him.
He, every once in a while she turns to me and goes, we have a white male son who's going to be a white old guy one day, God willing. This campaign of going after this, especially when you have children, neighbors, a parent, half the people that are railing against old white men being evil have a dad who's old and white. It seems like a bizarre strategy for me. It also seems a little insincere because if you really think that's the problem, are you really voicing it the way you're voicing it? Or are you just trying to get a little, it's turned into a Chuck E. Cheese where you can get the tickets and they're redeemable for a stuffed animal, and you're just running around, and the more you yell about sexism or racism or old white men, more tickets come out of the skee ball machine. So you just hop on CNN or MSNBC, you start talking, you start calling everyone racist. You say that a comment was a racist, it was driven by race. We have a society that where the cops are racist and there's systemic racism. School to prison. You yell school to prison pipeline, whole bunch of tickets come out, and it's all redeemable. And next thing you know, you just got a whole pile of tickets because you ran your goddamn mouth about stuff you didn't believe in. You don't think it's true. There's no way they think that's the society we live in.
Whatever fad is current, they're fully on board with it. You got to wonder, though, if there are long-term implications of this one. I mean, it does kind of make people hate each other if you keep talking. This is why we didn't used to talk this way, because the stakes are just too high.
Well, it is. I'm angry. if you are attempting to help a group, and that group could be young black males or it could be females in general, or you could pick any tribe and any group or any individual, and you, as a person who's in a position of authority, whether it be a parent or a politician, work overtime trying to convince that person there's a target on their back.
Exactly.
As far as society goes, there is nothing worse that you could do in terms of that person's progression in this society. You could go full Kathy Bates and hobble them.
That's exactly
and
right.
It would be much. I would much rather one of my children lose the ability to use their legs or legs and arms than have them convinced that society was against them, that the cops were against them, that they had a target on their back, that if they ever went on a job interview and didn't get the gig, it was because of their ethnicity, the color of their skin, their sexual proclivities. You have officially ruined that person that you claim. Every time you open your mouth, all you do is say, I am a champion for this person's rights. I'm a champion for this person. You hobble them, you destroy them, you ruin them.
I think that is such a wise observation, and I think that all the time. What would happen if I did to my kids what the Democratic Party does to African Americans? My kids would be in rehab. If I said to them, everybody hates you, just like that's the baseline. You just need to know that. Everyone hates you. No matter what you do, you will never rise above their hatred of you because the system is rigged and it's inescapable. I mean, what would happen to – maybe you have to be a parent to understand that.
Well, also, by the way, if a cop pulls you over, you better wrestle him for that gun because he's going to shoot you.
No, it's totally right. No, that's such a good point.
Look, I don't like the hyperbole. Like, it's a dangerous message. It is a dangerous message.
I totally agree.
It's a very dangerous message.
Too.
And mean as hell.